Absolute beauty of a morning. I really don't want to swim here, Daddy. And just the secret here is just being patient, biding your time, and picking the right gap. It can be tricky. I actually think there's a gap here now. Oh no! Oh no! Gonna have to do it again. No. Take it, dude.
Have it.
That one looks a little bit stunning. Looks like it could be safe.
That's my technique.
Yeah. Here we go. Give it.
Take it.
Just watch it, not another line. No, one down. And one again. Come a little bit towards me. Come, walk back towards me. Okay, that's it. Well done. Okay. Pump and one, nice and steady. Pull up slowly and then one down.
Coming around, boys, like a professional.
Keep the pressure. Well done. One more rod to move. Well done. Shifting, boys. One down. That's it, quickly. Up, one down. And again. That's it, and again. That's it, and again. Just try not to jerk too much, but pull up. And one. Fishes here. Pull up slowly. Take him full. That's it! Yes! Yee, Cam, my boy! Well done, bro. Okay, keep hold it.
I think that's the biggest one ever caught.
Well done, boy. Well done, Cam.
Did you guys film that?
Yeah. I'll do another cutter there. That's your first cutter?
Ever.
First cutter?
All by myself without any instruction from anyone as well.
100%.
Here we go, Daddy. Lots of bending here, Daddy.
What is that? Cheat? Oh no, it's a snook, big snook.
Big one, Dad.
Half-star snook. Good evening, guys, and welcome to the Go Fish Weekly Wrap-Up here in the dirty down south of Amamsden Toti. Once again, I'm Ace out, but next week the boys will join us in Durban for our weekly wrap-up every Thursday, where we'll Next week, we'll be covering bullfish and the tips and tactics around targeting them with Elaine Tarden. So that should be an exciting one. But guys, welcome to the show. And it's been a little bit of an iffy week, a bit of bad weather, one or two gaps around, and we're really getting into the thick of things with regards to season at the moment, chaps. So soon it's going to sort of taper off. Those cyclones and mods are going to maybe just calm down a little bit around this time of year, and things will start to settle around the sort of March, April period, where we'll start seeing some really, really, really good fishing. So stick around for the next 2 weeks, because it's really going to be getting on a bit on this coastline, on this South African coast, all the way from sort of Vidal and your northern areas down towards Shelley Beach. It's really going to be going off. In this episode of the Go Fish Weekly Wrap-Up, we really got an exciting topic that we're going to be chatting about, and that is the sight fishing for the big jeets and the tuna and the doggies and that. And we got a Deal Kaji, or Cage as he's known to a lot of us, that's going to be joining us for the Go Fish Weekly Wrap-Up tonight. He is an absolute machine when it comes to topwater angling, the stick baits and the poppers. So this is going to be one that you definitely do not want to miss. This oak's got some incredible information to pass on. But as we were talking about the bad weather that we've been having, a little bit of rain, some wests, some easts, one or two gaps were found, and Tyron Bain managed to get himself into one of the many marlin that have been around recently. And we've got a little video of that we'd like to share with you quickly. Tyron Bain into a beautiful marlin here off of Durban.
I reckon it was the last second, I think I did.
Sound on, Kim?
Got that.
I literally cannot believe this.
When you got on?
Got on my Suzuki 4500 and my Suzuki popping extreme. Yo, how epic was that? He's a flipping baby eye, but he's gorgeous. Yo. Today.
Yes, that is incredible footage. Tyron Bain and a mate of his off of Durban, getting into a lot of the many small marlin that have been around this time of year, and we kind of looking at it and thinking, why have there been so many small marlin around? And the only thing we can think of amongst all the anglers that I've spoken to is the fact that the water's been so warm. I mean, it's been up on that 26 degree temperature, and I really think that's why these marlin have been coming in. Tyron got that on a 5.0 mustard big game with a fluoro trace, fishing for tuna on a Saltiga 4500H and a Saltiga Extreme Popping Rod, the light version. So he was fishing really light for the tuna and that. They saw a bit of a bust up on the current line out deep, and that's what intrigued them to go and target those tuna. Got a couple of tunny, and then he got himself into that lovely marlin. So awesome stuff from Tyron. Aaron Walton also sent a little video that will get all of our blood pumping, and I think we all know the feeling behind this one. Check this one out.
Huh?
Unfortunately, he ended up getting bitten off there, but oh, boys, that thing makes me vibrate when I hear that, boys. Flipping out. I don't know, if you don't get excited by that sound, I don't think you're human. But getting into it now, Club Marine, as we all know, guys, are the leaders in the South African watercraft insurance scene at the moment. But something that a lot of us didn't know is they also do the short-term insurance. And they do this all through, they've got a lot of short-term insurance products through A-rated insurance companies. And it's honestly worth giving them a shout if you're looking for any short-term insurance or any watercraft insurance, anything to do with your vehicles or householders, you can give them a shout on quote@clubmarinesa.com, or you can get hold of us and we can put you on to the relevant person that you need to chat to there. It really is worthwhile getting involved with this team. They support us. They support a lot of the events that we do along our coastline and everything that we're passionate about, which is obviously angling chaps, and the anglers themselves. So they understand what we want, our wants and needs. Moving into it, we've got the Go Fish Super Series on the go at the moment, guys. If you haven't entered this, we're getting into the thick of it now from the prize point of view. We're going to be doing a combined prize going for the last 2 weeks and months prizes tomorrow. The Go Fish Super Series is a comp that has been brought into the fray because of obviously COVID and the times of not being able to have actual on-site events. So it's an app-based event where any offshore angler, whether you're a kayaker, jet ski, or ski boater, you can enter from any craft and you can fish off of any craft. It's a biggest fish comp, guys. So you can enter on the last day, you can enter tomorrow or tonight, and everyone's got a chance of getting that biggest fish. The event runs until the 25th of April, so there's still plenty time. It's right in the thick of it for season, so there's some really good fish to be caught. And like I said, anyone can win it. There's weekly lucky draws, there's monthly lucky draws. We've got species prizes, we've got ladies and juniors prizes, and obviously that biggest prize at the moment for the biggest fish is sitting at 20 grand, 10 grand cash and 10 grand tackle. It's an evolving event and it'll just climb from there, guys. So get on, enter through the KeepNet site, keepnet.co, and click on the tab for the Go Fish Super Series comp. Lawrence have brought out a really exciting product, and we managed to find a video of their new product called Active Target, guys. This basically enables the angler to watch high-res imagery of what the fish are doing below. You can literally see the fish coming up to chow your bait. And obviously, if you're doing something wrong, you can watch them swim away too. So we've got a really good informative video here on the new Active Target live sonar. And here it is from Lawrence.
Seeing the fish, their position, and how they respond in real time. That's game changing.
Well, there we have it from Lawrence, always pushing the boundaries with their technology. And I got to tell you, one thing my grandfather always said, as sort of technology evolved and reels always got better and bigger and whatnot, and more technology got brought into it. He was an old Scarborough fisherman, and he always said, geez, you guys are just not even giving the fish a chance. Well, he's passed away, and I think he'd be turning over in his grave if he had to see that active live target from Lawrence. But guys, just when you're about to pack it and just when you're about to sell your boat, Lawrence came back and got you back in there, Daddy. Lawrence active live target is going to get you in the fish. So don't get despondent. Get the active target and get it on the boat and get fishing. Watch what those stubborn buggers can sometimes do to you live, Daddy. But one thing that's quite exciting, obviously, we've got some of the borders opening up again. We've got Mozam opening up, and hopefully the restrictions are going to start to relax a little bit. And hopefully there's a couple of you guys that are quite keen to do some tours. So Go Fish has got you covered. We've got tours. We've got the Lazarus tours that are going to be kicking off at the end of August all the way through to the to December. We got a little promo video we're gonna play for you, and I'll just chat over it while we go. But this is a tour to Lazarus Banks that we do over the time of August through December. An absolute perler. I'm sure we'll go through it now with Cage. He's been on a couple with us. We've been fortunate enough to fish with him in that area. Then we've got the Primeiras, guys, which is in sort of the middle of Mozambique off of Kiliman. And that starts in April all the way through to the August period. Beautiful, beautiful spots. Some nice shallow water jigging as well as popping and jigging for your doggies as well. And then we move into Madagascar. We've got some awesome places, Barren Islands and Nosy Be. We've got Seychelles, which we had a cracker trip to Seychelles recently, where Cage and the boys went over in the beginning of December and absolutely climbed into a good couple of jeets over that side, or in the Seychelles out in the outer islands. Then we've got Kenya, Latham Island, Mafia Island, Fiji, and obviously a little bit of local trips, guys. We've got some big tuna action off of Cape Town. We caught some tanks there a couple of years back, and I know the guys have been getting some good fishing on the big tuna down there as well over this last sort of November, December season. Some really nice big catches. And then yeah, there's some local stuff, more local stuff. Sodwana, we've got a good couple of trips all over it. So if you guys are keen to get yourselves involved in a trip through Go Fish, give us a shout. Pop us an email. You can send the email to me, kirk@gofishmagazine.co.za, and I'll line you up with the trip. No matter whether you are a lady, a man, a junior, whatever it is, come on our liverboards, experience incredible fishing at a really good price. So yeah, guys, get in on it. All right, guys, yeah, some epic footage from our Laz trips there over the last couple of years. We had some really good fishing on big tuna. Obviously not last year due to COVID, but the year before we had some epic tuna fishing. You get your big jeets and dogs there as well. The current really hums, and it's just an epic place to fish, a real adventure. So get in touch with us if you want any more information. Those trips are happening as we speak and running forward for the rest of the year. Now, Suzuki, like all products that are importing from international waters, have struggled a little bit with stock, but they are coming, guys. The stock is coming at the moment. Suzuki has the DF60 AV and the DF200 AP models in stock. And if you are keen on those, get in touch with your closest Suzuki dealer. You can find that on the Suzuki website. And you can give them a shout and get one of those awesome outboards on the back of your boat, guys. It really is worth it getting into the Suzuki way of life. Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to welcome the man of the hour, the big man, KG. How are you, boys? Beautiful, man. Well, listen, I hope you can see our Facebook page. I don't know if you've got it up on your phone at all, anything like that. But I've got a little intro package that I'm going to play for the boys on Facebook. Move my mouse. Hey, sorry, I almost moved my mouse here. I've got a little intro package that just shows that we haven't brought up some cake just to talk about topwater fishing here. We've brought up a proper legitimate sauce here and an oak. Yeah, yeah, and an oak that, yeah, genuinely, guys, I've been fortunate enough to fish a lot of trips with you, Cage, and we keep saying every time, well, I keep saying every time I come back from a trip with you that I learn so much from fishing with you, and there's always something that I can take back with me and implement into my fishing. So, yeah, we just thought we'd put a little key package here together for you, but hopefully you can watch it tomorrow. I know you don't have the Facebook up now, but I'm going to play it for the boys because I think it's quite a lekker little intro. So here we go. Give us 30 seconds and then we'll be back with you. Beautiful, man. Well, but I'll get that video sent to you on let me just get the video back up here on WhatsApp there. But yeah, it was just a bit of a compilation of you jamming into a couple of doggies and some jeets over the years. Tell us a bit about your fishing background, Cage. I know it, but just for the viewers, give us a bit of background into your sort of fishing career so far.
Yeah, so firstly, Kirk, thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. It's always lucky to have a chat about fishing with you. I think you overplayed me a little bit there, but we'll try our best. Yeah, so my background is very much, most of the time, a freshwater background. Born and bred in Joburg, and probably I've spent a hell of a lot of time outdoor fishing, specifically for bass and tigerfish. And probably over the past 10 years or so, I've really started spending a lot more time trying to get out to the sea and focus on targeting mostly GT, a lot of shore-based stuff, and then a lot of offshore stuff as well. And that's been my obsession for good on 10 years now. And so, just keep on trying to research more and learn more every time we go out. And that's pretty much it.
Cage, I mean, you've had some incredible catches off the shore, off the boats, that sort of thing. I mean, that catch of yours off Zavora, just to give you guys a bit of a background on how mad this oak is about fishing. He'll go to Zavora for a weekend chasing a spring tide and hoping for a jeet or for a specific ledge that he goes and fishes in those areas there. How many times have you hooked up compared to how many times you've been busted up there, Cage? And what was the size of that jeet that you got out there?
Yeah, so it's probably been going a couple times a year since 2012. I don't know, 500-600 kilometers worth of walking, quick little weekend trips. Many times ace out, jump in the car on a Thursday night, drive through to Moz, fish a day and a half, and drive back fresh for work on Monday morning. Hooked up more times than I care to remember, and got my ass kicked. And over the years, landed two really good fish off the ledge. One went 130 centimeters, and the other went about 124. Both really solid fish. Both came up and ate a plug literally a meter or two away from my rod tip. So absolute heart attack. Both times I was fishing alone. So it was just, the whole experience is just epic, because you go through this whole thing, your heart's pounding, and, get to land a fish and panic and jam the GoPro into a rock to try and take some pictures. And in fact, the first time there was a guy, some local dude, collecting mussels on the rocks. So I screaming, got him over. It took me like half an hour to explain to him how to press the button on the camera, but we got it done. and then you release this fish, and there's the moment that you're standing there all alone, because any other trip, the boys are with you and everyone's high-fiving and chest pumping and screaming, and there was just nothing. The wind was blowing and all you can hear is the waves, and I'm like, who do I share this with? So yeah, unbelievable experience.
Oh no, I've seen that photo. It wasn't. Yes, it's just definitely something to behold. An animal that big that you can get off the shore. But Cage, it's a conversation.
To crop out the oak's fingers from the
GoPro. But it's a conversation. I mean, look, the topic to start off with is obviously something that we're both very passionate about. The topwater fishing, that topwater smash, that you just don't beat it. So we're going to be touching on the stick baiting and popping side of things tonight, guys, and lures specifically. We're going to be focusing on lures tonight and the actions and whatnot. Then we'll go, it's going to be a series, so we'll go into rigging of those lures, possibly into the next series, and then you'll go into rods and reels and carry on from there. So this is going to be a series, and yeah, massive thanks to you, Cage, for coming on and sharing the information with us. But it's a conversation that comes up often between you and I, and you, well, when I say often, you've brought it up before to me, where you say a bass angler, a good bass angler makes a great offshore or saltwater lure angler. And why is that? Just give us a bit of some information on that.
Yeah, so before I go on, I see there's a comment that's come up on your Facebook stream that says they can't hear me. So I don't know if the audio is all good.
Okay, let me just check here. Hold on 2 seconds. Just give a bit of a test there, Cage.
Testing, 1, 2. Valerie, is that okay?
Okay, my guys say that they can hear you fine, so I think it should be fine.
Cool.
Yeah.
We'll keep going. Now, so the reason I always tell you that, Kirk, is, and I don't think it's necessarily only bass anglers, but generally, if you are an outdoor angler, specifically freshwater, the cast retrieve type of stuff, the amount of lures and R&D that goes on all the time gives you this absolute mind-blowing universe of lures to choose from. And so over time, you have to really be understanding of what it is you want out of a lure. It's not about just choosing a popper, throwing it and popping. It's not about just choosing a jerkbait and jerking. You got to know what you want out of that lure. And so when I started trying to catch GTs on top water, I found myself applying the same type of approach to my fishing, saying, well, I'm fishing this type of spot, I'm fishing this type of conditions, what do I want out of this lure? And it was no different to the way we started approaching spots. So, it's not just getting to a ledge or getting to a pinnacle and starting to fan cast. It's about saying, well, understanding the spot, where is this fish going to position himself based on the current, based on the way the rock is, based on the way the ledge is, based on where we think the bait fish are going to be, and start targeting those fish like very specifically. And because bass fishing has become so technical, I automatically started, using that same approach for the jeets. And I think personally, it's been a big contributor to my own success, just being able to be really thinking all the time when you're out there and make small adjustments as the day goes by to really figure out exactly what those fish want. Because, I'm a firm believer in, it's fine, you can be 3 or 4 guys fishing off a boat and everybody's going to catch a fish. But there's definitely a reason one guy is getting 5 more bites than the guy next to him. And it's for me, it's about those small adjustments that you make. Sometimes small things that you pick up, this fish hit that popper when it actually wasn't exploding. It was a little bit more subtle. So do I need something with the smaller cup? Or, they were a bit shy on a really big bait. Do they want something a little bit smaller? So let's give them a smaller popper. And suddenly, when you start being able to piece that together a lot quicker, you start seeing that your bite rate goes up. Because, this offshore popping stick baiting thing, it's nothing more than work rate. The more casts you put in, the better your chances are of getting more bites, like any fishing. But the quicker you're able to kind of work out exactly what's going on, obviously, the rule of percentages, your bite rate is going to go up automatically. So that's my theory. I don't know whether it makes sense.
Well, look, I can tell you from my experience, and I know everyone will agree with me that's fished with you, the oak that generally gets all the bites, as you're saying, is you, Kazi. I'm looking at him. So I'm generally the oak that is holding pole and watching TV when you're on the boat. But it is always a joy to watch. It's like watching AB de Villiers play cricket when you're putting a lure together. But it's flipping, it's definitely a symphony checking you club all those jeets. But let's get into the popping. We'll start with the popping side of things. I mean, you can lead on this, but I don't know what you want to start with. But we can start with the popping side of things and maybe look at the various cups and that, and how you would go about choosing a specific popper and why, and sort of what conditions would determine that.
Cool. Maybe let's start at the top. Excuse the pun. we start with poppers. And I think before we dive into it, to kind of just tell everyone viewing that it's no different to any other lure fishing. So for the moment, just throw in the back of your mind the really fancy finishes and the awesome colors and all the stuff that you see when you get into a tackle shop and you see the lures. We all get caught by it, there's no doubt about that, but in my own experience, that piece of it makes a very small difference versus really focusing on action, number one, and profile, number two. Those are the two key things that I try and focus on when I'm trying to figure out what's going on. So, as far as poppers are concerned, I like to look at them as kind of two categories. One are your bloopers, which are generally your big, not big, but your cup-faced poppers, of which you're going to get different size cups. And the second category are going to be your skipping poppers. So often either a very small cup that you can work a lot faster, or your typical GT ice cream type plugs. So I'll start right there. I mean, for me, usually to try and pick apart a spot, I get to a spot and I've taken a couple of things out. So I hope when I pull it up in front of the camera, you guys can see it. But we'll start with skipping poppers and plugs. This is usually what I start with. I mean, the whole idea is to be able to, and it's condition based. So obviously if the sea is an absolute mess and I can't really see what's going on, lots of chop on the water, I would tend not to throw something like this. But if I've got fairly calm conditions or a slight chop on the water, I'm definitely going to start with a big Orion flapper. Everybody knows this is my absolute go-to. Otherwise, a big needle nose ice cream, or a skipping popper with a really small cup. The reason for this is all about efficiency. So it's about being able to cover water. So if I'm fishing a reef or a spot, I can quickly, if it takes you 5 minutes to work one cast on a big stick bait or a big popper, I'm able to get 2 or 3 casts in with a really fast moving bait. That way, even if I don't get a bite, I'll be able to quickly see whether there's fish in an area. Often you'll get a follow, you'll get a big blow up, so okay, fine, we're in the area, now it's to start, when you come back on the drift, let's slow it down. So typically that covers off plugs. Don't underestimate the power of the good old plug. I mean, every offshore trip, and you've seen it before, Kirk, you rock up with hundreds of the most expensive good-looking poppers and stick baits, and sometimes when those packs come in, all you really need to be throwing is a piece of nylon. No different with the tuna. So it's more about being able to figure out where they are, and if they're in that eating mood, it doesn't matter what you throw at them, they're going to chow this plug. And then if we go into the second part of the popper discussion is talking about the cup-faced poppers. So here it's quite simple. I mean, you want to be looking for two things. One is when you've got conditions that are fairly calm to moderate chop, is when you're going to start with a popper. You want something that's going to be able to throw a lot of water. You want to be able to have something that's going to throw the right type of noise, and this is where being able to experiment comes in, because a popper is not a popper is not a popper. Some of them, like this one, for example, big, 190 gram bait. If there's a fair bit of movement on the water, the extra weight of the lure allows me to keep this bait in contact with the water. The funny thing about poppers is you pop them, but as soon as you start losing contact with the water, so when this thing starts skiing or jumping or tumbling, the fish totally lose interest. So, when you're thinking about throwing weights of poppers, you got to match that to not necessarily just only the rod and reel that you're throwing, but really the condition. So if you start seeing, shucks, this thing is starting to ski or it's starting to tumble, that's when you want to start weighting up on your poppers. The second thing is obviously action. So, a popper like this one, for example, has got a really big cup, really big body, really heavy lure. So often, if I'm fishing deeper water, I want to be throwing something like this that throws the really deep bloop every time I pull it. Allows me also to fish it a lot slower. It's not for really, you really want to spend time allowing those fish to track that sound down and find this thing. And obviously it's throwing a lot of water, it's leaving a big bubble trail, there's something for them to chase. The second,
so just on that cage, just on that big popper, two specific instances, you were saying that you need to sort of go heavier on the popper in rougher conditions. And just on that, you know, a lot of guys have asked me often, when you've got rougher conditions, what do you do? And you've just said it there. You go a little bit heavier on your poppers. You go a little bit bigger on your poppers. And sort of the retrieves that you would possibly use on that is either, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd possibly go with a little bit of a quicker, shorter popping retrieve so that the fish can pick it up in the rougher water, or I'd really focus on a big pop dispersing a lot of water to be able to get them to see the difference between just a normal chop and an actual proper sort of fish dispersion on the surface of the water.
So often, even when you're popping, you automatically, and it happens to all of us, you just get too mechanical about the retrieve. You get in there and you're thinking about what you're doing. So you just pop and you reel, and you pop and you reel. And often, especially when you're throwing the bigger baits, you want to try and swap between those two, where you kind of pop, 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 wait, pop, 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 wait, or big pop. And then just sit and wait, taking the slack and give it 5 seconds to just sit there. Let him find it. You'll find very often, they're not going to hit it when it's moving. They're going to hit it when it's sitting absolutely still, because that's when they found it. And then quickly, just to talk about a couple of others. So cup face is one thing, and you'll see, you get obviously many different sizes and shapes of the cups, which is really about the amount of water that it throws, the amount of resistance in the water. And as a rule of thumb, the smaller the cup, the quicker you're going to be able to work the bait, and the more subtle the presentation. So often in flat, calm conditions, slick water, a really big, noisy popper isn't going to be the key. You think you're calling them, but actually it just puts them off. And those are the times when you want to try and experiment with something that's got a bit of a smaller cup, that's going to still spit water and still make a little bit of a noise, but it's a bit more subtle in as far as the presentation goes. And then the last point I'll make on these types of poppers is really just action and size. So when it comes to GTs, generally, there is no such thing as too big a popper. There is absolutely no such thing as too big a popper. The bigger, the better. They are not afraid. I mean, we've had, little rat GTs of 4 and 5 kilos come up and hit baits that are half their length. So, the only time I worry about downsizing my poppers are in 2 instances, when I know that actually I'm popping for, a lot of tunny that may be around, or if we're fishing inshore, and I know that there's a bigger chance of getting a lot more bycatch, so a lot more red bass, the green jobs, the bluefin kingies. That's when I'll start throwing smaller poppers. But if you're targeting a big bite from a big jeet, don't be scared of size. The last point I'll make is just on action. So you'll notice that a lot of them, your traditional poppers, have got this really tapered out tail section, which is something I generally look out for on my poppers, because specifically, when you rig them up with big heavy trebles, you want a little bit of a tapered tail, because when you pop it, you get a little bit of a shimmy in the tail when you've got a nice tapered tail on the popper. And so they often don't only just dive and bloop, they'll dive and wiggle almost like a stick bait before they come up again, which I find is a really nice trigger very often for finicky fish, when you get a little bit of an extra. And it's not necessarily the fact that that tail shakes a little bit. I think it's just the fact that because that bait is moving a little bit more, it gives off a little bit more flash.
Sure.
The last thing we can talk about, poppers wise, which is also, I think, a category that is not fished often, are diving poppers. So again, these are almost a hybrid between a popper and a stick bait. So often, in conditions where everything looks perfect to be popping, and you're popping away, and you get fish that either come up, chase, don't commit, or you're just not getting interest, it's a very, very good idea to tie on a diving popper, which is a lot more subtle. It still throws a really, really good bubble trail, but it doesn't make as much noise. On our last trip in December to the Seychelles, day 1, popping our hearts out, very little happening. I had 2 follows on a big popper, and I decided to switch over to a diving popper. And within the next hour, I had 7 bites, and everybody was still, kind of digging around tackle boxes. But the trick that day was just giving them something a little bit more subtle.
Sure.
And maybe we should leave poppers there. I know there's a hell of a lot more to talk about, but you're limited for time. So maybe if we want to move on to stick baits.
Yeah, guys, just to the guys that are watching, you're more than welcome to pop some questions on the feed as well, and we can get to them. But like Cage says, there's a lot to chat about, and this is a series. So if it's not covered now, we'll definitely be covering it going forward. Cage, just on those diving poppers, conditions wise, you've told us sort of, obviously if the fish aren't sort of really committing, and or if you're not getting the bites at all, but you can see the fish in that. The conditions wise, what are you kind of looking for with those diving poppers? When wouldn't you throw them? When would you? Yeah.
I would look at diving poppers the same way I look at usual blooping poppers. So, if it gets really choppy and my poppers are starting to kind of leave the water, I can't keep them on the water. If the swell is too big to keep that popper on the surface, it's the same time I'm not going to be throwing a diving popper. I want, a little bit of wind. I want a little bit of chop. I want the water to be working in the current a little bit to be able to work the diving popper effectively. The trick with the diving popper is it's less about just popping the lure, and you fish it a lot more like you fish a stick bait, where you actually want to dig the rod down so you get the nose to take water with it, dive in, create a big bubble trail, and pop up aggressively on the surface. That's what you want. And so when it gets too choppy, you just can't effectively do that with a diving popper.
Okay, all right.
So conditions wise, very similar to usual poppers.
Awesome.
Or cup face poppers.
Yeah. Cool. And then just on those plugs and that, looking at tuna wise, it's just like you said, it's just about scaling down more when you're coming into contact with tuna and that, going maybe for a smaller ice cream, and just, tuna are a hell of a lot more keyed in and zoned into a specific bait that they're feeding on and chasing compared to a jeet. So scaling down, I'm just talking more to the guys that are fishing off of the coast of Durban that are going to be taking this and trying to take what they learn here and impart it into their tackle and their procedures out on the water. Tuna, we had a lot of tuna off of Durban, and obviously, like I said, they're a lot more keyed into the profile of the bait and the size of the bait than they are jeets than jeets would be. But yeah, let's move on to sticks, Cage. If you're done with poppers, and we can check those out.
Yeah. So absolutely. On that point, absolutely agree with you. Jeets generally, they're not fussy. They are very, very opportunistic hunters. Even if they keyed in on little bait fish, but you got a big ass popper popping up on top, he's going to come up and investigate. Tuna, completely different animal. They just really, really get keyed into what they're eating. And so you really got to pay particular attention specifically for tuna around that matching the hatch concept. And so profile starts becoming a much bigger player when it comes to tuna than when it comes to jeets. Quickly, Kirky, I don't know if you recall, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, Lazarus trip, tuna busting all around the boat. We can't buy a bite. They're feeding on really small flying fish. And then we said, let's try and throw the smallest flying fish stick baits we got. And suddenly all the hooks start going on. It was exactly that point, that they were so keyed in to that specific bait they were chowing, they wouldn't even look at anything that didn't quite get there.
Yeah, 100%. I've got a question here from Rudy Barnard. He says, "Hi guys, I know it's called fishing and not catching, but I've been throwing poppers like mad and have never got any bite or any follow. Most probably not in the correct fishing zone. Will you move spots more often or throw something else?" There's a couple of things that could be wrong there, and definitely a couple of points that would need to be covered there. But I'll let you take this one, Cage. I think I'm not too sure. He hasn't mentioned where he's fishing, but it's obviously also a bit dependent on tides and whatnot, and depending what you're fishing for. But
obviously conditions do make a big difference. But if you've kind of worked out that the area you're fishing is a high percentage area, where you think that's going to be where GT is going to come through and hunt, fine, that's a great start. But again, these are not stationary fish. So very often, and specifically with GTs, I visit I visit Moss quite often, shore-based, and there's certain areas. I mean, I know over time I've seen GTs hunt in the area. I'll go fish the spot, but within 2 or 3 casts, if nothing is happening, I know those fish are not there. It's not like I'm suddenly gonna call them out of somewhere. So if my advice would be move a lot and keep moving, but don't ignore those spots, particularly if you think that's going to be a high percentage spot. So I would tend to find a couple of holes, ledges, little breaks in the reef, whatever, that I know, okay, these are high percentage spots, and I know if I've got a 2 or 3 hour window, before the tide pushes me off the reef or whatever, I'm going to work hard to really rotate those spots. And I don't spend a lot of time. It's 4, 5, 6 casts. If nothing is happening, pick up, run. I travel light. I move to the next one. Few casts, and I move to the next one, and kind of rotate them, because at some point I'm going to intercept a hunting fish. That's the way I try and approach it.
Yeah. Really, look, the only thing I can say to you is that you just need to persevere, honestly, because I can guarantee you now, when you get that first hit, nothing else is going to matter to you in life itself. When you get that first hit from a jeet, you're done. You are done. You are in the tackle shop buying every lure and all. Yeah.
I see you followed up your question here around shore-based. It's shore-based fishing. So my own experience around popping from the shore is that I've been a hell of a lot less successful throwing poppers in the shore break than I have been throwing plugs and stick baits. And I think it's got a lot to do, with the fact that it's very difficult to effectively work a popper if you're standing on the beach or on a ledge, because of all the waves. It's really difficult to get the best action out of that popper, unless you've got a nice section of flat water that's kind of protected from a reef or something like that. But other than that, my go-to when I'm shore-based GT fishing is either a really big plug, otherwise a sinking stick bait.
And also,
so give those 2 lure options a try.
I think also from that aspect, I mean, you always say it when you're on a trip. Generally, the oak who casts the furthest, and you'll vouch for me on this, Percy is the oak who generally gets his bait out there the furthest, and he's always the oak they're talking up. The amount of times, I've always said it to nearly every oak that's come on one of our trips, if you can cast the furthest, and you're one of the first casts on the spot, you are generally going to get the fish. So it stands to your sort of thing on plugs and stick baits. You can definitely get them further out there, especially from the rock and surf side. So a lot easier to cast. Yeah. On Vital itself, Rudy, get hold of us. We've got a couple of guys that fish up there quite often, and off the boat, there's a lot of key spots that you can actually zone in on at Vital and around specific times of year. Those GTs definitely push along the back line, and depending on, you want to be fishing those areas, those shallow water areas and those reefs on a pushing tide. You want water moving over those spots and currents moving over those spots, because that's what's going to get those GTs excited. And when you start seeing in Vital, you'll see a lot of little cutaways. There's a lot of little reef, especially south of the launch site, that you might want to focus on. And there's a lot of videos on that. I mean, if you go on to Nomad Fishing, Rudy, and look at how those guys fish cutaways and how they fish different areas of reefs, it might give you a little bit of a better understanding when you go on to maybe Google Earth and have a look at the top section of the reef at Vital, and it'll give you an idea of where those cutaways in those reefs are and where those currents are going to be pushing in, and that's where those GTs are generally going to be fishing, on a dropping or on a pushing tide. So give there's a lot of information on Google, but if you need any more, we've got a lot of information ourselves from guys that fish up there, so give us a call, drop us an email there. KGR, stick baits, what? Let's have a look at those.
Stick baits. So I think this is so maybe to simplify it, 2 general categories: floating and sinking. If I'm throwing, if I've got slick, calm conditions, or really if I've got any conditions where I would throw a popper, that is absolute prime water for throwing a floating stick bait. Over the last, I would say, 4 years or so, I find myself reaching for a stick bait before I reach for a popper, because I feel like it's got exactly the same amount of drawing power with half or less than half the effort and a lot less noise. But I tend to try and throw the biggest floating stick bait I have in my box. So try and find really, really big baits. I don't know if you guys can see that. Really big baits that have a really big profile that the fish can find, but also, really buoyant, so that when you pull them or sweep them, they aggressively dive, and because of the buoyancy, they kind of pop up nose first aggressively as well, so those conditions would be very much the same as conditions that I would throw a popper. When conditions get really choppy or rough, or the swell is too big to be able to effectively work a floating lure, or if we're fishing a really deep reef, so sometimes you're drifting over reef that's 25, 30, 40 meters deep. We've had it times where you think, oh shucks, at 30, 40 meters it's time to start dropping a bucktail jig or something else down there, but surprisingly you can still call GTs up from that deep to come and eat on the surface. And so when we start getting to the really deeper spots, so we start getting to really conditions that are not going to be ideal for fishing on the surface, that's when I'll start throwing a sinking stick bait. I don't like them as much as I like floating stick baits, because they don't have as much action, but the fish can find them a lot easier when the conditions get rough, and when you're fishing a lot deeper, it's easier to get down to the fish. So, and Kirk, again, we've seen it happen at Lazarus. You remember that one day off the ledge, you got that really, really big GT. We were sitting in 60 meters of water, where that fish came up and ate that black starwalker of yours.
Yeah.
So, stick bait is a whole topic on its own. I'm trying to think about how we keep it as short as possible. So, I guess maybe quickly, floating stick baits, there's obviously a lot of stuff that you can buy on the market. I think when it comes to jeets, probably two types that I focus on. One is when it comes to floating stick baits. One is those that are still kind of traditional wood-based baits, like your Dark Star Uluwas, these Amigaris, because of their buoyancy. So similar rule to how we fish crankbaits in bass fishing is that you get all the fancy kind of plastic and epoxy molded ones, but they simply don't have the natural buoyancy of wood. And there's something about a floating stick bait being made of wood, and the way it's so buoyant and it kind of moves in the water that gets fish going. That's the one point. The other point is shape. So you'll see, and I don't know if it's visible on the camera, but this is an ulua, which is a lot more of a kind of bulkier, rounder body versus a lot slimmer in this Amigari. And so this bait, for example, gives me a much slower, rolling, lazy action. This bait here with a much slimmer body gives me a much tighter wobble. So, it's really not about amassing as many lures as you can in terms of the ones that look prettiest in the shop. What I try and do when I go on a trip is not necessarily vary the 25 different colors of lures, but I want to make sure that I can cover as many presentations as possible with different lures. And it doesn't matter what color it is, because sometimes if the fish wants something that's really slow and rolling, whether I'm throwing a black ulua or a pink ulua, they don't care. They're going to eat it. It's the action that they want. And similarly, if they want something that's really tight and aggressive and popping out because of its buoyancy, whether it's blue or pink or green, they don't care. They're going to chow it. That's my belief. And then, the sinking stick baits, very similar. When it comes to sinking stick baits, I tend to try and throw baits that I feel are going to stand out for the fish. So I tend to try to throw, when I'm throwing floating baits, I try and stick to natural colors and natural profiles. When I'm throwing sinking stick baits, I'm not shy to get a bit bright with color, because I want them to be able to find that big, bright bait. Because very often when you're pulling a sinking stick bait through, you're pulling it through schools of fusees and schools of bait. So you want them to be able to pick up that lure as opposed to it blending in. When it comes to the other thing, I guess, when it comes to stick baits, is it's really the only time, that I'll really think about downsizing my stick bait in order to match the hatch. And so on any trip, I'll stick to making sure that I can cover actions as my first rule, and the second rule is being able to cover a couple of different profiles in as far as size is concerned. And so, it's the only lure kind of class for the topwater stuff where I'm going to travel with some really small baits, because we've experienced it so many times that you out in the middle of nowhere, come up on a school of busting tuna, but they're eating tiny little flying fish or tiny little sprats, and all your lures are just too big and they don't care. So one tip on sinking stick baits is to always pack a couple of small profile baits specifically for tuna. And I would think of our coast and the guys that target them often off jet skis and kayaks, etc. That may be a good tip to take home is to invest in a couple of smaller sinking stick baits when they're a little bit shy. They're in the area, they're a little bit shy to come up and eat a popper, but a little snack like this here, they can't say no.
What is that, Cage? Is that a jackfin that you've got there? Or pelicans?
It is a jackfin.
Jackfin.
Indeed, it is a jackfin.
Now, Cage, I've got a question from Scott Hunter. Scott Hunter is a brilliant kayak angler and offshore angler in his own right. He's phenomenal. He's got a question here around stick baits and wahoo and sort of what stick baits you'd go for with regards to wahoo. I know one of my firm favourites in that Star Walker range in the Kohuru. Scott, that's the Star Walker Kohuru. That was the 180 that I was fishing. I got a lot of wahoo on that, but I'd say for our coastline, probably sticking to around that 140 size would probably be a better profile for our coastline. Cage, I don't know if you want to weigh in on a couple of lures from the wahoo side on that.
Yeah, so look, I mean, I've never specifically targeted them, and every time caught a wahoo on stick bait was pretty much bycatch, trying to catch GTs.
Yeah.
But what I have noticed over the years is that, like doggies, they also preferred stick baits that had a bit of a slower rolling action versus something that's a lot more aggressive. And so this particular bait, the Darkstar Ulua, in the 90 size and the 100 size, which is a bit of a smaller bait, has been really good in being able to trigger strikes from wahoo. I mean, very often with this bait as well, it's if you're fishing it, it's got a very slow rolling action, but very often even trawling, just chuck it behind the boat and it's got a very slow rolling action. We've got so many wahoo just moving from spot to spot, dragging an ulua behind the boat.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I think Guy Logan was telling us the other day with regards to fishing in Mozam and going from spot to spot. You're traveling sort of 3Ks. He always puts a stick bait behind him. He went to Moz the other day. I think he caught 8 kuta, he reckons, in a day on just putting a stick bait behind the boat. It's works incredibly well.
Yeah.
Cage, just from that sort of one moment sticks out really significantly in my mind. We were in the Seychelles fishing. I think it was maybe the second to last day, and we were fishing a reef off of, I think it was the back end of Poivre, I think it was, and you went for a lure that had it was a stick bait, and everyone was kind of getting one fish here, one fish there, and you were just sort of, you had figured them out with regards to the lure that they were looking for. And when I asked you about it, you said, well, this lure's got a wider wobble to it than this. It was a sort of a slow retrieved lure, but you had said, no, well, this lure actually has a wider wobble to it than your sort of your other lure that obviously had a tighter action. In that case, are you just going through your lures and trying different things, or do you actually have a thought process behind that and saying, right, hey, they want a wider wobbled action because of this?
Yeah, so we were obviously scratching around tackle boxes trying to figure out what the hell those fish want. So, you start progressing through everything, and I think my process is not to work through every lure in my box, but to work through as many actions as I can so I can try and figure out what they want. So, and that's why I said, the first thing I said was throw color away in the bin for this discussion, because it actually doesn't matter. Action is everything. So, and that's what I did was to say, okay, fine. We threw a popper, they didn't want it. We threw a diving popper, they didn't want it. We started throwing stick baits. Floating, they were shy. Sinking, couldn't buy a bite. And then on one of my casts on a sinking stick bait, I wasn't even working the bait. I was just slowly retrieving the bait and it was doing its thing, but on a constant retrieve. And I got a bite, and I said, okay, well, hold on, maybe there's something here. So then I switched to what we call not a stick bait, we call this a swim bait, which is really a stick bait that's got an action just on a straight retrieve. You don't have to sweep it, and it's got this wide glide on its own, and on that day that was the trick. But I don't think it's got anything to do with like having actually figured them out, but it was really by a process of elimination, saying let's work through different actions rather than working through the lure box. I think that's, for me, I always have to remind myself not to get caught up by the pretty lures in the box, and say, well, let's try something, show them something different as far as action is concerned, not color.
Yeah. Cage, I think that has been an incredible evening. I don't know if there's anything more that you want to touch on from your side, from the stick baits and the poppers side of things.
No, I think we've got through quite a bit. I mean, it's obviously you feel like you're skimming the surface, because when you love this stuff, you can talk all night about it.
For sure.
But like you said in the beginning, I'm really keen, to do a lot more of this type of stuff, so we can start talking about rigging and start talking about how hook choices, even hook choices start impacting the way lures swim. So I know, for example, a lot of us go out there, you buy a couple of trebles, you slap your trebles on and you start fishing. But you notice subtle differences around saying, well, what if I, put a treble on the belly and a single on the back, or start nose hooking with an assist, certain stick baits, because the action starts changing because of the weight differences of different types of hooks. So, we can start talking about those kind of things as well.
Yeah. Cage, as always, Brew, learned so much and very, very informative. I think one of the big things that I'm going to take out of this chat alone is just look, when I'm going to the tackle shop and looking at different stick baits, I'm definitely going to be looking at that shape of the nose and that tapered tail in a popper, just to sort of make sure that I've got those wider profiles covered, as well as those more slender, sleek profiles covered as well, so I can get more action in the box. And hopefully I'm not watching TV the next time we go out, but I'm getting involved next to you there as well.
Justin, I always fish split ring to swivel in as far as connection is concerned. I haven't found that it makes any difference to the fish. It obviously makes it a lot more easier to be able to quickly change out lures and change action, etc. So, that setup for me is less about kind of trying to give the fish something that doesn't have a lot of hardware on the nose, and more about being efficient when I'm out there. I make this point to Kirk every time we go out, and you call me crazy, but a small thing like tying an FG knot. So when it came time to practice FG knots, I found myself sitting in front of the TV every night with a stopwatch to see how quickly I could tie an FG knot. And I got to a point where I was like at 35 seconds, and my theory was, if I could tie it in 35 seconds and the guy next to me would take 2 minutes, then I could get 2 more casts in. So it's the same thing with the split ring. It just means you can be able to change out a lot quicker, meaning you can get more casts in, meaning you got more shots at a bite. For me, it's really just about efficiency and work rate.
And especially when you're drifting over a specific area, a specific reef, you want to be getting as many shots in as possible, especially if it's a shorter section of reef. So, 100%, Brew. Cage, thanks very much, Brew. Really appreciate you taking the time tonight. I know you're a busy guy, and we really appreciate you taking the time to sit with us and go through something you're very passionate about. What knot do you tie to the swivel and split ring? From Tristan?
4-turn uni.
4-turn uni. There you go, Tristan. Cage, thanks very much.
You can get 4 turns on 200 pound. Sometimes the leader's really big, but 3 or 4 turns, or a figure of 8, you don't need more than that.
Yeah. Let's see, we've got a big one here from Rudy. I'll try and check. We've got 3 bars. Try and give us some line.
So Rudy, I think I understand exactly what you're saying. So often, if I throw a stick bait behind the boat, I put the rod in the rod holder and keep it trolling like I would, trolling a Williamson or whatever. So I'll keep the rod in my hand, and every now and then sweep the rod tip or twitch the rod tip or do something that makes that lure do something a little bit different out there. And I think, that sudden change of movement, and again, I'll go back to my bass fishing, that sudden change of cadence in a lure is often what triggers a bite. And it's not because they want to eat it, it's purely a reaction. They're following it because they think it looks interesting. And they don't eat it, they don't bite it because they want to eat it. They bite it purely out of reaction.
Yeah, 100%. It's the same thing as when you're getting a follow from a fish and you just up that retrieval of your you're getting that follow, you just up that retrieval slightly of your reel, and all of a sudden he commits to the
Instinctively he's going to yap at it.
100%. Cage, thanks very much, but I'm gonna jam it off there. We really appreciate it, Brew, and we'll catch you for episode 2 soon.
Awesome. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, thanks, but likewise, and I'm sure all of the guys have as well. Really appreciate the time, Cage. We'll chat soon, Brew. Thanks very much.
Cheers, Cookie. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Keep well, man. Bye. Well, there we go, guys. A really informative meeting with Cage there, chat with Cage on stick baiting and popping. If there's any more information that you'd like on that form of fishing, guys, it's an exceptionally exciting form of fishing, the topwater fishing, getting that topwater smash. Honestly, once you get that, there is nothing else that matters in fishing. It is that addictive. I can promise you that. Guys, the latest digital mag from Go Fish is out. Head on to the Google App Store or the Apple Play Store, and you can download the latest issue of Go Fish for absolutely free. Check it out. There's past issues there as well. A lot of information on all your offshore facets, and a couple of some sort of freshwater articles in there as well every now and then. So check it out. Let us know what you think. We'll be with you next Thursday for some bullfish fishing techniques from Elaine Tarden. There's been a lot of bullfish in the water at the moment, and it's going into season now. February, March, we're going to start cooking with bullfish, chaps, especially up in the areas like Sodwana, Richards Bay, those sort of spots. And we've already seen a lot of bullfish action down here on the coast off Durban and our south coast areas. So tune in next Thursday as we chat to Elaine Tarden about some bullfishing techniques, guys. Thanks very much for tuning in. To all of you guys that have watched and taken part tonight, really appreciate it. Till next week, thanks very much.